Welcome back, viewers, and today we're going to be discussing the economic impact of $1 trillion. There is a bit of information that I would like to present for everyone's consideration today. We are going to be talking about the Biden administration and their $1 trillion infrastructure bill. So let's get started. This bill will deliver $550 billion of new federal investments into America's infrastructure over the next 5 years. Essentially, this should mean additional funding for many departments. Some included highways and roads, bridges, rail, the power grid, water systems, airports, broadband infrastructure, and public transit will all get a big boost. On the surface, this seems like a positive. Infrastructure is something that this country is in dire need of updating if we are to pace or surpass other developed nations. Most of the funding will pass through the U.S. Department of Transportation and either will be awarded to states annually based on a formula or dispersed through a competitive grant program. Job creation is at the forefront of everyone's mind at this point. It is important to note here that while this kind of spending will create more jobs, we have so many vacancies now, one must hope that the jobs that this creates will be filled along with those additional jobs that we have lost since the pandemic. That in mind, it is also imperative to say these jobs will be months down the line, perhaps closer to a year or more. Over the weekend, Biden said people could start seeing the effects, quote, within the next 2 to 3 months, noting that it will begin with people being told they're going to be working and things are going to move forward, end quote. That provides a peek behind the curtain and the fact that the impact being referred to is people being told that they will be working in the future and that they will have some income at some point after a few more months or more. But after they are assured there will be work, some should become available over the next 5 years, depending on project timelines, planning, and grant distribution. It was also noted that money funneled through existing programs and channels would likely be the first to reach the market. As usual, it's important to insert the obligatory "I should hope so," considering the channels exist already. Moving on. A lot of those funds will go to state departments of transportation for highway maintenance and repair. States will be getting roughly 1/3 more in formula highway funding than the year before. What this essentially means is that when it comes to those areas, jobs should see more availability in the spring as contracts are drawn up and bid out for construction work being done at that time. One of the new programs that will need to be developed and planned is the installation of electric vehicle chargers. As that isn't an existing channel, we likely won't see real traction there for quite some time. So that gives us a preview of coming attractions for about $550 billion of the bill. Another $100 billion was designated for the grant program that was briefly mentioned earlier. The Department of Transportation will have to set the criteria, then solicit and review applications from state and local governments before announcing the awards. These funds are expected to hit the market later than any of the others. During the review process, the Department of Transportation will set the criteria for the new funding, and then it will be their responsibility to make sure the money goes to projects that help meet the Biden administration's goals of combating climate change and advancing equitable access to transportation. On a positive note, high demand exists for projects like this. There hasn't been enough funding to effectively fill demand for these jobs. So for example, last year, applications received for the Infrastructure for Rebuilding America program, also known as INFRA, collectively requested $6.8 billion, which is more than 7 times the funding that is available or was available at that current time. This should mean that such projects have already been planned, engineered, and can be executed as soon as this funding becomes available. Just keep in mind, while the current administration wants to talk about creating these jobs, it's important to understand that the investments are likely to have more of a long-term impact on job creation than an immediate boom. That's not to downplay the fact that infrastructure reinvestment is a win. Making our country more efficient and effective is always a plus. A Moody's Analytics report found that the infrastructure spending will create more than 800,000 jobs by the middle of the decade. Similarly, S&P Global found that a $1 trillion investment in infrastructure would lead to 883,600 new jobs by the year 2030. Another note to consider other than job creation is the impact on inflation. As we all know, that's hurting right now. Given that it will take months or years for the spending to reach the market, it likely won't have dire impact. That's assuming the dollar recovers over that course of time. Also of importance, while the legislation includes a multitude of measures to pay for the spending without raising taxes, it is expected to add $256 billion to the federal budget deficit over the next 10 years, and that's according to the Congressional Budget Office, which I will refer to later as the CBO. Speaking of funding, while lawmakers claim the package pays for itself, the CBO score found it would instead add billions of dollars to the deficit over 10 years, and that many of the pay-for provisions would not raise as much money as the Democrats said that they would. In addition to this, according to the text and a 57-page summary of the legislation, lawmakers leaned heavily on repurposing unused COVID-19 relief funds to pay for the legislation. The CBO found these measures would provide roughly $22 billion in savings, although this was misrepresented roughly in the form of $263 billion, and that was claimed by the lawmakers themselves. More pandering, it seems. I guess hindsight is always 20/20. This one in particular was very important to draw attention to. Another item in the text is $53 billion that stems in part from states opting to terminate the pandemic unemployment benefits early in hopes of pushing the jobless to return to work. This was part of the plan to pay for the budget. So for the conservatives out there, remember this: even the Dems wanted to stop people from sitting at home. Also, for the liberals or Democrats out there, even the Dems weren't going to allow this to go on for as long as they promised you. On a financial sector tangent, the CBO also said that the legislation will raise about $50 billion by imposing new Superfund fees and changing the tax reporting requirements for cryptocurrencies, among other measures. So if you thought your coins would avoid government fingers, prepare. Those pies are about to be fingered. So $1.2 trillion later, we will be hundreds of billions more in deficit, but build new bridges and roads, strive for transportation safety, especially cyclists and pedestrians, which is specifically called out as a major part of $11 billion in that category. We will modernize public transportation, move towards zero-emission transportation, a bargain of only $39 billion. Then improve railroads, both passenger and freight, to the tune of $66 billion. Another $7.5 billion, and we will build a network of electric vehicle charging stations across the nation. Internet speeds should soar with $65 billion in funding. Ports will receive $17 billion, while airports another $25 billion. Electric grid, $65 billion, $55 billion for water infrastructure. Let's just hope some of that goes to Flint. Another $50 billion to protect those systems from drought, flood, and cyber attack. $21 billion to clean up Superfund and brownfield sites, reclaim abandoned mine land, and cap orphan gas wells. Here's what won't be included of those hundreds of billions. First, $400 billion to bolster caregiving for aging and disabled Americans. What that means is expanding home care and nursing facility access. 2, have improved the wages of home health workers, raise it above $12 an hour and access them for unionization. 3, $100 billion for workforce development. What that means is dislocated worker assistance and career path development as children enter high school. And 4, $18 billion that Biden proposed to modernize Veterans Affairs hospitals, those facilities that on average are 47 years older than private sector hospitals. So those few at the end were the things that were promised to be in the bill that are not. That should give an idea of what to expect, what to watch out for, and where some of that money is going to be going. It also shows you the value we place on many things within our modern society. So take all of that information for what it's worth. Weigh the cost for yourself. What is most important? What has the greatest benefit? Is the timing right for all of this spending? All of this and more for your consideration. So there are the facts, and let's begin. It's time for the viewers to decide. As always, think freely, discuss openly.